Shalom, shalom, shalom. You are live and direct with your Akazaki Yahoo, giving all praises, honor, and great esteem unto the Most High Power, Yahuwah Bahashim, Yahushua HaMashiach, and to the 12 tribes of Israel who are scattered to the four quarters of the earth. I say shalom wa baruki. That is peace and blessings. And I cannot wait to the day that the Most High brings us back together, and we are once again 12 tribes, one family, one nation, under the Most High Power, under one covenant, and back in our own land with a heart of flesh and no more a heart of stone, with our enemies under our feet. Hallelujah. Praises to the Abba. All right. So first of all, after praising the Most High and peace and blessings to the nation Israel, I want to give a shout out to this brother who has been making these videos. And this brother is doing an outstanding job in telling the stories. Myself and my aunt, we have been going through the text and reading it. And this brother has done a magnificent job in doing the same, not necessarily reading it, but bringing it to life and giving it life through this process that he's using. So shout out to the brother. I forget his name, but I believe it's listed on his credits. But we're going to give him all the accolades that he deserves, because he's doing a magnificent job, very outstanding work. And I hope you enjoy this video as much as I have, and continue to do so. All praises to the Abba. Hallelujah. Jason Talley. Shout out to Jason Talley.
In the wilderness of Sinai, the Lord spoke to Moses in the tent of meeting, commanding him to take a census of the whole Israelite community. Every male aged 20 and older, able to serve in the army, was to be counted by their ancestral tribes and families. The total number of men fit for military service came to 603,550. The Levites, however, were not counted among them, as they were set apart to care for the tabernacle and its furnishings. The tribes of Israel were assigned specific places to camp around the tabernacle, ensuring order and organization. Each tribe had its own leader and banner. The tribe of Judah, with its large numbers, camped on the east side, followed by Issachar and Zebulun. To the south were Reuben, Simeon, and Gad. On the west side were Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin. Dan, Asher, and Naphtali camped to the north. The Levites camped around the tabernacle itself, to protect the community from the wrath of the Lord, if anyone else came near. The Lord gave detailed instructions on the duties of the Levites, dividing them into 3 clans: the Kohathites, the Gershonites, and the Merarites. Each clan had specific responsibilities regarding the tabernacle's structure and its sacred items. The Kohathites were in charge of the sanctuary's most sacred objects. The Gershonites managed the curtains and coverings, and the Merarites took care of the frames and pillars. God also instructed Moses on the purification of the camp, emphasizing the importance of holiness. Anyone who was unclean due to a skin disease or contact with a dead body had to be sent outside the camp until they were purified. Additionally, there were laws regarding restitution for wrongs committed, and the procedure for a woman suspected of infidelity. The Nazirite vow was introduced, allowing individuals to dedicate themselves to the Lord through a period of abstinence from wine, cutting their hair, and avoiding contact with the dead. At the end of their vow, they offered sacrifices and shaved their heads as a symbol of their commitment. The leaders of Israel brought offerings for the dedication of the altar. Each day for 12 days, one leader from each tribe brought offerings of silver, gold, grain, incense, and animals for sacrifice. These offerings symbolized the unity and devotion of the tribes to the Lord. The Lord spoke to Moses again, instructing him to set up the 7 lamps on the lampstand in the tabernacle, ensuring they illuminated the area in front of it. The Levites were then consecrated and purified for their service, symbolizing their total dedication to the Lord. As the Israelites prepared to leave Sinai, the Lord gave instructions on the use of silver trumpets to signal the community. The trumpets were to be blown to call the community together, announce the time to set out, and alert the people during times of war or celebration. On the 20th day of the 2nd month of the 2nd year, the cloud lifted from above the tabernacle of the covenant law, and the Israelites set out from the desert of Sinai. The Israelites had begun their journey from Mount Sinai to the Promised Land, but soon they started to complain about their hardships. Their grumbling displeased the Lord, and his anger was kindled. Fire from the Lord burned among them and consumed the outskirts of the camp. The people cried out to Moses, who prayed to the Lord, and the fire died down. This place was called Taberah, meaning burning, because the fire of the Lord had burned among them. Despite this warning, the people continued to grumble. They longed for the variety of foods they had in Egypt: fish, cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic. They grew tired of the manna, the miraculous food that the Lord provided each day. The manna was like coriander seed and looked like resin. The people would gather it, grind it, cook it, and make it into cakes that tasted like something made with olive oil. But now, their craving for meat grew intense, and they wept aloud, each family at the entrance of their tents. Moses was deeply troubled by the people's complaints and went to the Lord, overwhelmed by the burden of leading them. He prayed, "I am your servant, Lord, so why are you doing this to me? What have I done to deserve this? You've made me responsible for all these people, but they're not my children. You told me to nurse them along and to carry them to the land you promised their ancestors. They keep whining for meat, but where can I get meat for them? This job is too much for me. How can I take care of all these people by myself? If this is the way you're going to treat me, just kill me now and end my miserable life." The Lord responded by instructing Moses to gather 70 elders of Israel, known to be leaders and officials, and bring them to the tent of meeting. There, the Lord would take some of the spirit that was on Moses and put it on them so they could share the burden of the people. The Lord also promised to provide meat for the people. He told Moses that they would eat meat not just for a day or two, but for a whole month until it came out of their nostrils and became loathsome to them, because they had rejected the Lord who was among them and had longed for Egypt. Moses questioned how this could be possible given their large numbers, but the Lord assured him that his power was not limited. Moses gathered the 70 elders, and the Lord came down in a cloud and spoke with him. He took some of the spirit that was on Moses and placed it on the 70 elders. When the spirit rested on them, they prophesied, but they did not do so again. 2 men, Eldad and Medad, who were listed among the elders but had remained in the camp, also had the spirit rest on them, and they prophesied there. A young man ran to tell Moses, and Joshua, Moses' assistant, urged Moses to stop them. But Moses replied, "Are you jealous for my sake? I wish that all the Lord's people were prophets, and that the Lord would put his spirit on them." Then the Lord sent a wind that drove in quail from the sea, which fell around the camp in great quantities. The people spent all day, night, and the next day gathering the quail, and they spread them out all around the camp. But while the meat was still between their teeth, before it could be consumed, the Lord's anger burned against the people, and he struck them with a severe plague. This place was named Kibroth Hattaavah, meaning graves of craving, because there they buried the people who had craved other food. From Kibroth Hattaavah, the Israelites traveled to Hazeroth and stayed there. Although Moses was the most humble person in all the world, Miriam and Aaron started complaining. "Moses had no right to marry that woman from Ethiopia. Who does he think he is? The Lord has spoken to us, not just to him." The Lord heard their complaint and told Moses, Aaron, and Miriam to come to the entrance of the sacred tent. There the Lord appeared in a cloud and told Aaron and Miriam to come closer. Then, after commanding them to listen carefully, he said, "I, the Lord, speak to prophets in visions and dreams, but my servant Moses is the leader of my people. He sees me face to face, and everything I say to him is perfectly clear. You have no right to criticize my servant Moses." The Lord became angry with Aaron and Miriam. And after the Lord left and the cloud disappeared from over the sacred tent, Miriam's skin turned white with leprosy. When Aaron saw what had happened to her, he said to Moses, "Sir, please don't punish us for doing such a foolish thing. Don't let Miriam's flesh rot away like a child born dead." Moses prayed, "Lord God, please heal her." But the Lord replied, "Miriam would be disgraced for 7 days if her father had punished her by spitting in her face. So make her stay outside the camp for 7 days before coming back." The people of Israel did not move their camp until Miriam returned 7 days later. Then they left Hazeroth and set up camp in the Paran desert. As the Israelites camped in the desert of Paran, the Lord instructed Moses to send men to explore the land of Canaan, which he was giving to the Israelites. Moses selected one leader from each of the 12 tribes to go on this reconnaissance mission. Among them were Caleb from the tribe of Judah and Hoshea, who Moses called Joshua, from the tribe of Ephraim. Moses gave the spies specific instructions. They were to see what the land was like, whether the people living there were strong or weak, few or many, what kind of land they lived in, whether it was good or bad, and what kinds of towns they lived in, whether they were unwalled or fortified. They were also to see if the soil was fertile or poor, and if there were trees. Finally, they were to bring back some of the fruit of the land. It was the season for the first ripe grapes. The 12 spies set out and explored the land from the desert of Zin as far as Rehob, near Lebo Hamath. They went up through the Negev and came to Hebron, where they saw the descendants of Anak, including Ahiman, Sheshai, and Talmai. Hebron had been built 7 years before Zoan in Egypt. When they reached the valley of Eshcol, they cut off a branch bearing a single cluster of grapes. It was so large that 2 of them had to carry it on a pole between them, along with some pomegranates and figs. The place was called the Valley of Eshcol because of the cluster of grapes the Israelites cut there. After 40 days of exploration, the men returned to Moses, Aaron, and the whole Israelite community at Kadesh in the desert of Paran. They reported to the entire assembly and showed them the fruit of the land. They gave Moses this account: "We went into the land to which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey. Here is its fruit. But the people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. We even saw descendants of Anak there." They described the various people living in the land. Caleb silenced the people before Moses and said, "We should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it." However, the other men who had gone up with him disagreed. They spread a bad report among the Israelites, saying, "The land we explored devours those living in it. All the people we saw there are of great size. We saw the Nephilim there. The descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them." Their report caused fear and discouragement among the Israelites, leading to a pivotal moment of doubt and rebellion against the plans of the Lord. After the Israelites heard the report from the 12 men who had explored Canaan, the people cried all night and complained to Moses and Aaron, "We wish we had died in Egypt or somewhere out here in the desert. Is the Lord leading us into Canaan just to have us killed and our women and children captured? We'd be better off in Egypt." Then they said to one another, "Let's choose our own leader and go back." Moses and Aaron bowed down to pray in front of the crowd. Joshua and Caleb tore their clothes in sorrow and said, "We saw the land ourselves, and it's very good. If we obey the Lord, he will surely give us that land rich with milk and honey. So don't rebel. We have no reason to be afraid of the people who live there. The Lord is on our side, and they won't stand a chance against us." The crowd threatened to stone Moses and Aaron to death. But just then, the Lord appeared in a cloud at the sacred tent. The Lord said to Moses, "I have done great things for these people, and they still reject me by refusing to believe in my power. So they will no longer be my people. I will destroy them, but I will make you the ancestor of a nation even stronger than theirs." Moses replied, "With your mighty power you rescued your people from Egypt. So please don't destroy us here in the desert. If you do, the Egyptians will hear about it and tell the people of Canaan. Those Canaanites already know that we are your people, and that we see you face to face. And they have heard how you lead us with a thick cloud during the day, and flaming fire at night. But if you kill us, they will claim it was because you weren't powerful enough to lead us into Canaan as you promised. Show us your great power, Lord. You promised that you love to show mercy and kindness. And you said that you are very patient, but that you will punish everyone guilty of doing wrong, not only them, but their children and grandchildren as well. You are merciful, and you treat people better than they deserve. So please forgive these people, just as you have forgiven them ever since they left Egypt." Then the Lord said to Moses, "In answer to your prayer, I do forgive them. But as surely as I live, and my power has no limit, I swear that not one of these Israelites will enter the land I promised to give their ancestors. These people have seen my power in Egypt and in the desert, but they will never see Canaan. They have disobeyed and tested me too many times. But my servant Caleb isn't like the others. So because he has faith in me, I will allow him to cross into Canaan, and his descendants will settle there." Now listen, Moses. The Amalekites and the Canaanites live in the valleys of Canaan, and tomorrow you'll need to turn around and head back into the desert toward the Red Sea. The Lord told Moses and Aaron to give this message to the people of Israel. "You sinful people have complained against me too many times. Now I swear by my own life that I will give you exactly what you wanted. You will die right here in the desert, and your dead bodies will cover the ground. You have insulted me, and none of you men who are over 20 years old will enter the land that I solemnly promised to give you as your own. Only Caleb and Joshua will go in. You were worried that your own children would be captured, but I, the Lord, will let them enter the land you have rejected. You will die here in the desert. Your children will wander around in this desert 40 years, suffering because of your sins, until all of you are dead. I will punish you severely every day for the next 40 years, 1 year for each day that the land was explored. You sinful people who ganged up against me will die here in the desert." 10 of the men sent to explore the land had brought back bad news and had made the people complain against the Lord. So he sent a deadly disease that killed those men, but he let Joshua and Caleb live. The people of Israel were very sad after Moses gave them the Lord's message, so they got up early the next morning and got ready to head toward the hill country of Canaan. They said, "We were wrong to complain about the Lord. Let's go into the land that he promised us." But Moses replied, "You're disobeying the Lord. Your plan won't work, so don't even try it. The Lord refuses to help you because you turned your backs on him. The Amalekites and the Canaanites are your enemies, and they will attack and defeat you." But the Israelites ignored Moses and marched toward the hill country, even though the sacred chest and Moses did not go with them. The Amalekites and the Canaanites came down from the hill country, defeated the Israelites, and chased them as far as the town of Hormah. After the rebellion and its consequences, the Lord spoke to Moses, giving further instructions for the Israelites when they enter the promised land. He commanded that when they make offerings to the Lord, burnt offerings, grain offerings, drink offerings, or offerings for special vows, they must accompany these with specific measures of flour mixed with oil and wine. These offerings were to be presented as a pleasing aroma to the Lord, whether they were made by native-born Israelites or foreigners living among them. The Lord emphasized that the same laws and regulations applied to both groups, ensuring unity and consistency in worship practices. The Lord also addressed unintentional sins, providing a way for the community or individuals to seek atonement through specific sacrifices. If the whole community sinned unintentionally, they were to offer a young bull as a burnt offering and a goat as a sin offering. For individuals who sinned unintentionally, a female goat was to be offered. However, for those who sinned defiantly, showing contempt for the Lord, the punishment was severe, and they were to be cut off from their people. Additionally, an incident occurred where a man was found gathering wood on the Sabbath, and upon the Lord's command, he was stoned to death by the community. To help the Israelites remember and obey all the Lord's commands, the Lord instructed them to make tassels on the corners of their garments with a blue cord, serving as a visual reminder to live a holy and obedient life. Korah, son of Izhar, was a Levite from the Kohathite clan. One day he called together Dathan, Abiram, and On from the Reuben tribe, and the 4 of them decided to rebel against Moses. So they asked 250 respected Israelite leaders for their support, and together they went to Moses and Aaron and said, "Why do you think you're so much better than everyone else? We're part of the Lord's holy people, and he's with all of us. What makes you think you're the only ones in charge?" When Moses heard this, he knelt down to pray. Then he said to Korah and his followers, "Tomorrow morning the Lord will show us the person he has chosen to be his priest. and that man will faithfully serve him. Korah, here is what you and your followers must do. Get some fire pans, fill them with coals and incense, and place them near the sacred tent, and the man the Lord chooses will be his priest. Korah, this time you Levites have gone too far. You know that the God of Israel has chosen you Levites from all Israel to serve him by being in charge of the sacred tent, and by helping the community to worship in the proper way. What more do you want? The Lord has given you a special responsibility, and now, Korah, you think you should also be his priest. You and your followers have rebelled against the Lord, not against Aaron. Then Moses sent for Dathan and Abiram, but they sent back this message: "We won't come. It's bad enough that you took us from our rich farmland in Egypt to let us die here in the desert. Now you also want to boss us around. You keep promising us rich farmlands with fertile fields and vineyards. But where are they? Stop trying to trick these people. No, we won't come to see you." Moses was very angry and said to the Lord, "Don't listen to these men. I haven't done anything wrong to them. I haven't taken as much as a donkey." Then he said to Korah, "Tomorrow you and your followers must go with Aaron to the Lord's sacred tent. Each of you take along your fire pan with incense in it and offer the incense to the Lord." The next day the men placed incense and coals in their fire pans and stood with Moses and Aaron at the entrance to the sacred tent. Meanwhile, Korah had convinced the rest of the Israelites to rebel against their two leaders. When that happened, the Lord appeared in all his glory and said to Moses and Aaron, "Get away from the rest of the Israelites so I can kill them at once." But the two men bowed down and prayed, "Our God, you gave these people life. Why would you punish everyone here when only one man has sinned?" The Lord answered Moses, "Tell the people to stay away from the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram." Moses walked over to Dathan and Abiram, and the other leaders of Israel followed. Then Moses warned the people, "Get away from the tents of these sinful men. Don't touch anything that belongs to them, or you'll be wiped out." So everyone moved away from those tents, except Korah, Dathan, Abiram, and their families. Moses said to the crowd, "The Lord has chosen me and told me to do these things. It wasn't my idea. And here's how you will know. If these men die a natural death, it means the Lord hasn't chosen me. But suppose the Lord does something that has never been done before. For example, what if a huge crack appears in the ground, and these men and their families fall into it and are buried alive, together with everything they own? Then you will know they have turned their backs on the Lord." As soon as Moses said this, the ground under the men opened up and swallowed them alive, together with their families and everything they owned. Then the ground closed back up, and they were gone. The rest of the Israelites heard their screams, so they ran off, shouting, "We don't want that to happen to us." Suddenly the Lord sent a fire that burned up the 250 men who had offered incense to him. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell Aaron's son Eleazar to take the fire pans from the smoldering fire and scatter the coals. The pans are now sacred, because they were used for offering incense to me. Have them hammered into a thin layer of bronze as a covering for the altar. Those men died because of their sin, and now their fire pans will become a warning for the rest of the community." Eleazar collected the pans and had them hammered into a thin layer of bronze as a covering for the altar, just as the Lord had told Moses. The pans were a warning to the Israelites that only Aaron's descendants would be allowed to offer incense to the Lord. Anyone else who tried to would be punished like Korah and his followers. The next day the people of Israel again complained against Moses and Aaron. "The two of you killed some of the Lord's people." As the people crowded around them, Moses and Aaron turned toward the sacred tent, and the Lord appeared in his glory in the cloud covering the tent. So Moses and Aaron walked to the front of the tent, where the Lord said to them, "Stand back. I am going to wipe out these Israelites once and for all." They immediately bowed down and prayed. Then Moses told Aaron, "Grab your fire pan and fill it with hot coals from the altar. Put incense in it. Then quickly take it to where the people are and offer it to the Lord, so they can be forgiven. The Lord is very angry, and people have already started dying." Aaron did exactly what he had been told. He ran over to the crowd of people and stood between the dead bodies and the people who were still alive. He placed the incense on the pan, then offered it to the Lord and asked him to forgive the people's sin. The disease immediately stopped spreading, and no one else died from it. but 14,700 Israelites were dead, not counting those who had died with Korah and his followers. Aaron walked back and stood with Moses at the sacred tent. The Lord told Moses, "Call together the 12 tribes of Israel, and tell the leader of each tribe to write his name on the walking stick he carries as a symbol of his authority. Make sure Aaron's name is written on the one from the Levi tribe. Then collect all the sticks. Place these sticks in the tent right in front of the sacred chest where I appear to you. I will then choose a man to be my priest, and his stick will sprout. After that happens, I won't have to listen to any more complaints about you." Moses told the people what the Lord had commanded, and they gave him the walking sticks from the 12 tribal leaders, including Aaron's from the Levi tribe. Moses took them and placed them in the Lord's sacred tent. The next day, when Moses went into the tent, flowers and almonds were already growing on Aaron's stick. Moses brought the 12 sticks out of the tent and showed them to the people. Each of the leaders found his own and took it. But the Lord told Moses, "Put Aaron's stick back. Let it stay near the sacred chest as a warning to anyone who might think of rebelling. If these people don't stop their grumbling about me, I will wipe them out." Moses did what he was told. The Israelites cried out to Moses, "We're done for and doomed if we even go near the sacred tent." In the wilderness, the Lord spoke directly to Aaron, making it clear that he and his sons, along with their father's family, the Levites, were to take on the weighty responsibility of caring for the sanctuary and the priesthood. This duty was not just a privilege, but a solemn charge, as any mistakes or breaches of the sacred duties would result in severe consequences. Aaron and his sons were to ensure that no unauthorized person approached the sacred objects or the altar, as this was a responsibility reserved exclusively for them. The Levites, who were given to assist Aaron and his sons, were to help with the work of the tent of meeting, but were not allowed to come near the most holy things. The Lord emphasized that the priesthood was a precious gift to Aaron and his descendants, a covenant of service that required dedication and respect. The Lord also provided for the needs of the priests and Levites. He declared that the priests would receive a portion of the offerings brought by the Israelites, including the best of the grain, oil, and wine, as well as the first fruits and various offerings dedicated to the Lord. These holy gifts were for the priests and their families to eat, but only within the sanctuary, as they were considered sacred. For the Levites, who were not given a land inheritance like the other tribes, the Lord assigned the tithes brought by the Israelites as their inheritance in return for their service at the tent of meeting. From these tithes, the Levites were to offer a portion, a tithe of the tithes, to the priests as an offering to the Lord. This arrangement ensured that both the priests and Levites were supported as they faithfully carried out their sacred duties, reinforcing the importance of their roles in maintaining the spiritual well-being of the Israelite community. The Lord gave Moses and Aaron instructions for a special ritual of purification. The ritual centered around the sacrifice of a red heifer, a rare and unblemished cow. The heifer was to be slaughtered outside the camp, and its blood was to be sprinkled 7 times toward the front of the tent of meeting. The entire animal, including its hide, flesh, blood, and offal, was to be burned. As the heifer burned, the priest was to throw cedar wood, hyssop, and scarlet wool into the fire. The ashes from this sacrifice were to be collected and stored in a clean place outside the camp, to be used in a purification water mixture for the Israelites. This purification water, made from the ashes of the red heifer mixed with fresh water, was essential for cleansing anyone who became ritually unclean through contact with a dead body. If someone touched a dead body, they would be considered unclean for 7 days. On the 3rd and 7th days, they were to be sprinkled with the purification water. After washing their clothes and bathing, they would be clean by evening. If they did not undergo this purification, they would remain unclean and be cut off from the community, as their impurity would defile the Lord's sanctuary. This ritual was established as a lasting ordinance for the Israelites, ensuring that they could maintain purity and continue their worship and service to the Lord. The people of Israel arrived at the Zin Desert during the 1st month and set up camp near the town of Kadesh. It was there that Miriam died and was buried. The Israelites had no water, so they went to Moses and Aaron and complained, "Moses, we'd be better off if we had died along with the others in front of the Lord's sacred tent. You brought us into this desert, and now we and our livestock are going to die. Egypt was better than this horrible place. At least there we had grain and figs and grapevines and pomegranates. but now we don't even have any water." Moses and Aaron went to the entrance to the sacred tent, where they bowed down. The Lord appeared to them in all of his glory and said, "Moses, get your walking stick. Then you and Aaron call the people together and command that rock to give you water. That's how you will provide water for the people of Israel and their livestock." Moses obeyed and took his stick from the sacred tent. After he and Aaron had gathered the people around the rock, he said, "Look, you rebellious people, and you will see water flow from this rock." He raised his stick in the air and struck the rock 2 times. At once, water gushed from the rock, and the people and their livestock had water to drink. But the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "Because you refused to believe in my power, these people did not respect me, and so you will not be the ones to lead them into the land I have promised." The Israelites had complained against the Lord, and he had shown them his holy power by giving them water to drink. So they named the place Meribah, which means complaining. Moses sent messengers from Israel's camp near Kadesh with this message for the king of Edom. "We are Israelites, your own relatives, and we're sure you have heard the terrible things that have happened to us. Our ancestors settled in Egypt and lived there a long time, but later the Egyptians were cruel to us. And when we begged our Lord for help, he answered our prayer and brought us out of that land. Now we are camped at the border of your territory, near the town of Kadesh. Please let us go through your country. We won't go near your fields or vineyards, and we won't drink any water from your wells. We will stay on the main road until we leave your territory." But the king of Edom answered, "No, I won't let you go through our country, and if you try, we will attack you." Moses sent back this message, "We promise to stay on the main road, and if any of us or our livestock drink your water, we will pay for it. We just want to pass through." But the king insisted, "You can't go through our land." Then Edom sent out its strongest troops to keep Israel from passing through its territory, so the Israelites had to go in another direction. After the Israelites had left Kadesh and had gone as far as Mount Hor on the Edomite border, the Lord said, "Aaron, this is where you will die. You and Moses disobeyed me at Meribah, and so you will not enter the land I promised the Israelites. Moses, go with Aaron and his son Eleazar to the top of the mountain. Then take Aaron's priestly robe from him and place it on Eleazar. Aaron will die there." Moses obeyed, and everyone watched as he and Aaron and Eleazar walked to the top of Mount Hor. Moses then took the priestly robe from Aaron and placed it on Eleazar. Aaron died there. When Moses and Eleazar came down, the people knew that Aaron had died, and they mourned his death for 30 days. The Canaanite king of Arad lived in the southern desert of Canaan, and when he heard that the Israelites were on their way to the village of Atharim, he attacked and took some of them hostage. The Israelites prayed, "Our Lord, if you will help us defeat these Canaanites, we will completely destroy their towns and everything in them, to show that they belong to you." The Lord answered their prayer and helped them wipe out the Canaanite army and completely destroy their towns. That's why one of the towns is named Hormah, which means destroyed place. The Israelites had to go around the territory of Edom, so when they left Mount Hor, they headed south toward the Red Sea. But along the way, the people became so impatient that they complained against God and said to Moses, "Did you bring us out of Egypt just to let us die in the desert? There's no water out here, and we can't stand this awful food." Then the Lord sent poisonous snakes that bit and killed many of them. Some of the people went to Moses and admitted, "It was wrong of us to insult you and the Lord. Now please ask him to make these snakes go away." Moses prayed, and the Lord answered, "Make a snake out of bronze and place it on top of a pole. Anyone who gets bitten can look at the snake and be saved from death." Moses obeyed the Lord, and all of those who looked at the bronze snake lived, even though they had been bitten by the poisonous snakes. As the Israelites continued their journey to Canaan, they camped at Oboth, then at Aye Abarim in the desert east of Moab, and then in the Zered Gorge. After that, they crossed the Arnon River Gorge and camped in the Moabite desert bordering Amorite territory. The Arnon was the border between the Moabites and the Amorites. A song in the Book of the Lord's Battles mentions the town of Waheb, with its creeks in the territory of Suphah. It also mentions the Arnon River, with its valleys that lie alongside the Moabite border and extend to the town of Ar. From the Arnon, the Israelites went to the well near the town of Beer, where the Lord had said to Moses, "Call the people together, and I will give them water to drink." The Israelites left the desert and camped near the town of Matana, then at Nahaliel, and then at Bamoth. Finally, they reached Moabite territory, where they camped near Mount Pisgah in a valley overlooking the desert north of the Dead Sea. The Israelites sent this message to King Sihon of the Amorites: "Please let us pass through your territory. We promise to stay away from your fields and vineyards, and we won't drink any water from your wells. As long as we're in your land, we'll stay on the main road." But Sihon refused to let Israel travel through his land. Instead, he called together his entire army and marched into the desert to attack Israel near the town of Jahaz. Israel defeated them and took over the Amorite territory from the Arnon River Gorge in the south to the Jabbok River Gorge in the north. Beyond the Jabbok was the territory of the Ammonites, who were much stronger than Israel. The Israelites settled in the Amorite towns, including the capital city of Heshbon, with its surrounding villages. King Sihon had ruled from Heshbon, after defeating the Moabites and taking over their land north of the Arnon River Gorge. After the Israelites had settled in the Amorite territory, Moses sent some men to explore the town of Jazer. Later, the Israelites captured the villages surrounding it and forced out the Amorites who lived there. The Israelites headed toward the region of Bashan, where King Og ruled, and he led his entire army to Edrei to meet Israel in battle. The Lord said to Moses, "Don't be afraid of Og. I will help you defeat him and his army. Just as you did King Sihon, who ruled in Heshbon, Og's territory will be yours." So the Israelites wiped out Og, his family, and his entire army. There were no survivors. Then Israel took over the land of Bashan. Israel moved from there to the hills of Moab, where they camped across the Jordan River from the town of Jericho. When King Balak of Moab and his people heard how many Israelites there were, and what they had done to the Amorites, he and the Moabites were terrified and panicked. They said to the Midianite leaders, "That huge mob of Israelites will wipe out everything in sight, like a bull eating grass in a field." So King Balak sent a message to Balaam son of Beor, who lived among his relatives in the town of Pethor, near the Euphrates River. It said, "I need your help. A large group of people has come here from Egypt and settled near my territory. They are too powerful for us to defeat. So would you come and place a curse on them? Maybe then we can run them off. I know that anyone you bless will be successful, but anyone you curse will fail." The leaders of Moab and Midian left and took along money to pay Balaam. When they got to his house, they gave him Balak's message. "Spend the night here," Balaam replied, "and tomorrow I will tell you the Lord's answer." So the officials stayed at his house. During the night, God asked Balaam, "Who are these people at your house?" "They are messengers from King Balak of Moab," Balaam answered. "He sent them to ask me to go to Moab and put a curse on the people who have come there from Egypt. They have settled everywhere around him, and he wants to run them off." But God replied, "Don't go with Balak's messengers. I have blessed those people who have come from Egypt, so don't curse them." The next morning, Balaam said to Balak's officials, "Go on back home. The Lord says I cannot go with you." The officials left and told Balak that Balaam refused to come. Then Balak sent a larger group of officials, who were even more important than the first ones. They went to Balaam and told him that Balak had said, "Balaam, if you come to Moab, I'll pay you very well and do whatever you ask. Just come and place a curse on these people." Balaam answered, "Even if Balak offered me a palace full of silver or gold, I wouldn't do anything to disobey the Lord my God. You are welcome to spend the night here, just as the others did. I will find out if the Lord has something else to say about this." That night, God said, "Balaam, I'll let you go to Moab with Balak's messengers, but do only what I say." So Balaam got up the next morning and saddled his donkey, then left with the Moabite officials. Balaam set out on his journey, but God's anger was kindled, because Balaam was eager to accept the rewards offered by Balak. So one of the Lord's angels stood in the road to stop him. When Balaam's donkey saw the angel standing there with a sword, it walked off the road and into an open field. Balaam had to beat the donkey to get it back on the road. Then the angel stood between two vineyards, in a narrow path with a stone wall on each side. When the donkey saw the angel, it walked so close to one of the walls that Balaam's foot scraped against the wall. Balaam beat the donkey again. The angel moved once more and stood in a spot so narrow that there was no room for the donkey to go around. So it just lay down. Balaam lost his temper, then picked up a stick and whacked the donkey. When that happened, the Lord told the donkey to speak, and it asked Balaam, "What have I done that made you beat me 3 times?" "You made me look stupid," Balaam answered. "If I had a sword, I'd kill you here and now." "But you're my owner," answered the donkey, "and you've ridden me many times. Have I ever done anything like this before?" "No," Balaam admitted. Just then the Lord let Balaam see the angel standing in the road holding a sword, and Balaam bowed down. The angel said, "You had no right to treat your donkey like that. I was the one who blocked your way, because I don't think you should go to Moab. If your donkey had not seen me and stopped those 3 times, I would have killed you and let the donkey live." Balaam replied, "I was wrong. I didn't know you were trying to stop me. If you don't think I should go, I'll return home at once." "It's all right for you to go," the Lord's angel answered, "but you must say only what I tell you." So Balaam went on with Balak's officials. When Balak heard that Balaam was coming, he went to meet him at the town of Ir on the Arnon River, which is the northern border of Moab. Balak asked, "Why didn't you come when I invited you the first time? Did you think I wasn't going to pay you?" "I'm here now," Balaam answered, "but I will say only what God tells me to say." They left and went to the town of Kiriath Huzoth, where Balak sacrificed cattle and sheep and gave some of the meat to Balaam and the officials who were with him. The next morning, Balak took Balaam to the town of Bamoth Baal. From there, Balaam could see some of the Israelites. Balak eagerly prepared 7 altars and offered sacrifices of bulls and rams on each one, hoping to receive Balaam's curse on Israel. But when Balaam sought the Lord's message, God gave him a blessing for Israel instead. Balaam spoke of how the Israelites were a people set apart, blessed by God, numerous and victorious. Balak was furious, but Balaam reminded him that he could only speak the words that God gave him. Undeterred, Balak took Balaam to another location, the field of Zophim, hoping that a different view of the Israelite camp might result in a curse. Again, they built 7 altars and offered sacrifices. But once more, God gave Balaam a blessing for Israel, declaring that God was not a man that he should lie, nor a human that he should change his mind. God had blessed Israel, and no curse could stand against them. Balaam spoke of Israel's strength, their protection by God, and the assurance that they would triumph over their enemies. Balak was even more enraged, but Balaam could only repeat that he must obey God's commands. Still not giving up, Balak took Balaam to a 3rd location, the top of Peor, overlooking the desert. Again, 7 altars were built, and sacrifices were made. This time, Balaam did not seek omens, but immediately looked toward the Israelite camp. The Spirit of God came upon him, and Balaam delivered a powerful prophecy, extolling Israel's beauty, their future prosperity, and their dominance over their enemies. He foretold the rise of a great king from Israel, whose power would crush the enemies of Moab and other surrounding nations. Balak, now beside himself with anger, told Balaam to return home without reward, as he had blessed, rather than cursed Israel. Balaam reminded Balak that even if he had offered all the silver and gold in his palace, he could only speak the words of the Lord. Before departing, Balaam gave one final prophecy, predicting the downfall of Moab and other nations that opposed Israel. With that, Balaam returned home, and Balak went his way, having failed to curse the people of Israel. Instead, the Israelites remained under God's blessing, poised to enter the promised land, with the assurance of divine protection and favor. While the Israelites were camped at Acacia, some of the men had sex with Moabite women. These women then invited the men to ceremonies where sacrifices were offered to their gods. The men ate the meat from the sacrifices and worshipped the Moabite gods. The Lord was angry with Israel because they had worshipped the god Baal Peor. So he said to Moses, "Take the Israelite leaders who are responsible for this and have them killed in front of my sacred tent where everyone can see. Maybe then I will stop being angry with the Israelites." Moses told Israel's officials, "Each of you must put to death any of your men who worshipped Baal." Later, Moses and the people were at the sacred tent, crying, when one of the Israelite men brought a Midianite woman to meet his family. Phinehas, the grandson of Aaron the priest, saw the couple and left the crowd. He found a spear-eight and followed the man into his tent, where he ran the spear through the man and into the woman's stomach. The Lord immediately stopped punishing Israel with a deadly disease, but 24,000 Israelites had already died. The Lord said to Moses, "In my anger I would have wiped out the Israelites if Phinehas had not been faithful to me. But instead of punishing them, I forgave them. So because of the loyalty that Phinehas showed, I solemnly promise that he and his descendants will always be my priests." The Israelite man that was killed was Zimri son of Salu, who was one of the leaders of the Simeon tribe. And the Midianite woman killed with him was Cosbi, the daughter of a Midianite clan leader named Zur. The Lord told Moses, "The Midianites are now enemies of Israel, so attack and defeat them. They tricked the people of Israel into worshipping their God at Peor, and they are responsible for the death of Cosbi, the daughter of one of their own leaders." After the devastating plagues and the rebellions that had occurred during the Israelites' journey through the wilderness, the Lord commanded Moses and Eleazar, the son of Aaron, to take a second census of the Israelite men who were 20 years old or more, those able to serve in Israel's army. This census was to be taken as the Israelites camped on the plains of Moab by the Jordan River, across from Jericho, marking the end of their long journey and the start of a new chapter as they prepared to enter the Promised Land. Moses and Eleazar gathered the leaders of the tribes and began counting the people tribe by tribe. The census recorded the names and numbers of the various families within each tribe, revealing the total number of fighting men. The tribe of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, had 43,730 men. The tribe of Simeon, which had been severely reduced due to the punishment of the previous rebellions, had 22,200 men. The tribe of Judah, the most numerous, had 76,500 men, followed by Issachar with 64,300 and Zebulun with 60,500. The sons of Joseph, Ephraim, and Manasseh had 32,500 and 52,700 men, respectively. Other tribes were also counted, each reflecting the population growth or decline that had occurred during the years in the wilderness. The total number of men counted in this census was 601,730, slightly fewer than those counted in the first census conducted at Mount Sinai 40 years earlier. This new generation of Israelites was now poised to take possession of the land that had been promised to their ancestors. The Lord instructed Moses that the land of Canaan was to be divided among the tribes according to the size of each tribe, with larger tribes receiving more land and smaller tribes receiving less. The division of the land was to be determined by lot, ensuring that each tribe received its inheritance as God had planned. However, among the Levites, who were also counted in this census, there were 23,000 males 1 month old or more. Unlike the other tribes, the Levites were not given a territorial inheritance in the Promised Land, as their role was to serve in the tabernacle and care for the sacred duties of worship. As the census concluded, it became clear that none of the men who had been counted in the first census at Mount Sinai, except for Caleb and Joshua, were still alive. The entire generation that had come out of Egypt had died in the wilderness, as the Lord had decreed, due to their disobedience and lack of faith. This new generation, counted and ready, was now the one that would enter the Promised Land, under the leadership of Joshua, with the promise of God's continued guidance and blessing. Zelophehad was from the Manasseh tribe, and he had 5 daughters, whose names were Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. One day his daughters went to the sacred tent, where they met with Moses, Eleazar, and some other leaders of Israel, as well as a large crowd of Israelites. The young women said, "You know that our father died in the desert, but it was for something he did wrong, not for joining with Korah in rebelling against the Lord. Our father left no sons to carry on his family name, but why should his name die out for that reason? Give us some land like the rest of his relatives in our clan, so our father's name can live on." Moses asked the Lord what should be done, and the Lord answered, "Zelophehad's daughters are right. They should each be given part of the land their father would have received. Tell the Israelites that when a man dies without a son, his daughter will inherit his land. If he has no daughter, his brothers will inherit the land. But if he has no brothers, his father's brothers will inherit the land. And if his father has no brothers, the land must be given to his nearest relative in the clan. This is my law, and the Israelites must obey it." The Lord said to Moses, "One day you will go up into the Abarim mountains, and from there you will see the land I am giving the Israelites. After you have seen it, you will die, just like your brother Aaron, because both of you disobeyed me at Meribah near the town of Kadesh in the Zin desert. When the Israelites insulted me there, you didn't believe in my holy power." Moses replied, "You are the Lord God, and you know what is in everyone's heart. So I ask you to appoint a leader for Israel. Your people need someone to lead them into battle, or else they will be like sheep wandering around without a shepherd." The Lord answered, "Joshua son of Nun can do the job. Place your hands on him to show that he is the one to take your place. Then go with him and tell him to stand in front of Eleazar the priest and the Israelites. Appoint Joshua as their new leader, and tell them they must now obey him, just as they obey you. But Joshua must depend on Eleazar to find out from me what I want him to do as he leads Israel into battle." Moses followed the Lord's instructions and took Joshua to Eleazar and the people. Then he placed his hands on Joshua and appointed him Israel's leader. The Lord told Moses to say to Israel's tribal leaders, "When one of you men makes a promise to the Lord, you must keep your word. Suppose a young woman who is still living with her parents makes a promise to the Lord. If her father hears about it and says nothing, she must keep her promise. But if he hears about it and objects, then she no longer has to keep her promise. The Lord will forgive her because her father did not agree with the promise. Suppose a woman makes a promise to the Lord and then gets married. If her husband later hears about the promise but says nothing, she must do what she said, whether she meant it or not. But if her husband hears about the promise and objects, she no longer has to keep it, and the Lord will forgive her. Widows and divorced women must keep every promise they make to the Lord. Suppose a married woman makes a promise to the Lord. If her husband hears about the promise and says nothing, she must do what she said. But if he hears about the promise and does object, she no longer has to keep it. The Lord will forgive her because her husband would not allow her to keep the promise. Her husband has the final say about any promises she makes to the Lord. If her husband hears about a promise and says nothing about it for a whole day, she must do what she said. Since he did not object, the promise must be kept. But if he waits until the next day to stop her from keeping her promise, he is the one who must be punished. These are the laws that the Lord gave Moses about husbands and wives, and about young daughters who still live at home. The Lord said to Moses, "Before you die, make sure that the Midianites are punished for what they did to Israel." Then Moses told the people, "The Lord wants to punish the Midianites, so tell our men to prepare for battle. Each tribe will send 1,000 men to fight." 12,000 men were picked from the tribes of Israel, and after they were prepared for battle, Moses sent them off to war. Phinehas the son of Eleazar went with them, and took along some things from the sacred tent, and the trumpets for sounding the battle signal. The Israelites fought against the Midianites, just as the Lord had commanded Moses. They killed all the men, including Balaam son of Beor, and the 5 Midianite kings, Evi, Rechem, Zur, Hur, and Reba. The Israelites captured every woman and child, then led away the Midianites' cattle and sheep, and took everything else that belonged to them. They also burned down the Midianite towns and villages. Israel's soldiers gathered together everything they had taken from the Midianites, including the captives and the animals. Then they returned to their own camp in the hills of Moab, across the Jordan River from Jericho, where Moses, Eleazar, and the other Israelite leaders met the troops outside camp. Moses became angry with the army commanders and said, "I can't believe you let the women live. They are the ones who followed Balaam's advice and invited our people to worship the god Baal Peor. That's why the Lord punished us by killing so many of our people. You must put to death every boy and all the women who have ever had sex. But do not kill the young women who have never had sex. You may keep them for yourselves." Then Moses said to the soldiers, "If you killed anyone or touched a dead body, you're unclean and have to stay outside the camp for 7 days. On the 3rd and 7th days, you must go through a ceremony to make yourselves and your captives clean. Then wash your clothes and anything made from animal skin, goat's hair, or wood." Eleazar then explained, "If you need to purify something that won't burn, such as gold, silver, bronze, iron, tin, or lead. You must first place it in a hot fire. After you take it out, sprinkle it with the water that purifies. Everything else should only be sprinkled with the water. Do all of this just as the Lord commanded Moses. Wash your clothes on the seventh day, and after that you will be clean and may return to the camp. The Lord told Moses, "Make a list of everything taken from the Midianites, including the captives and the animals. Then divide them between the soldiers and the rest of the people. Eleazar the priest and the family leaders will help you. From the half that belongs to the soldiers, set aside for the Lord 1 out of every 500 people or animals, and give these to Eleazar. From the half that belongs to the people, set aside 1 out of every 50, and give these to the Levites in charge of the sacred tent." Moses and Eleazar followed the Lord's instructions and listed everything that had been taken from the Midianites. The list included 675,000 sheep and goats, 72,000 cattle, 61,000 donkeys, and 32,000 young women who had never had sex. Each half included 337,500 sheep and goats, 36,000 cattle, 30,500 donkeys, and 16,000 young women. From the half that belonged to the soldiers, Moses counted out 675 sheep and goats, 72 cattle, 61 donkeys, and 32 women, and gave them to Eleazar to be dedicated to the Lord. Then from the half that belonged to the people, Moses set aside 1 out of every 50 animals and women, as the Lord had said, and gave them to the Levites. The army commanders went to Moses and said, "Sir, we have counted our troops, and not one soldier is missing. So we want to give the Lord all the gold jewelry we took from the Midianites. It's our gift to him for watching over us and our troops." Moses and Eleazar accepted the jewelry from the commanders, and its total weight was over 200 kilograms. This did not include the things that the soldiers had kept for themselves. So Moses and Eleazar placed the gold in the Lord's sacred tent to remind Israel of what had happened. The Israelites were nearing the end of their journey to the Promised Land, and as they approached the borders, the tribes of Reuben and Gad saw that the lands of Jazer and Gilead were ideal for their livestock. Recognizing the fertility and abundance of the region, they approached Moses, requesting to settle there rather than crossing the Jordan River into the land that had been promised to their ancestors. They argued that this land was suitable for their families and animals, and they expressed their desire to claim it as their inheritance. Moses initially responded with frustration and concern, fearing that this request mirrored the actions of their ancestors, who had refused to enter the Promised Land years earlier due to fear and doubt. He worried that the request would discourage the rest of the Israelites from crossing the Jordan and fulfilling God's plan. Moses reminded them of the consequences that had befallen the previous generation for their disobedience, including wandering in the desert for 40 years. He feared that another act of disobedience would bring further punishment upon the people. However, the leaders of Reuben and Gad reassured Moses that they had no intention of abandoning their fellow Israelites. They proposed a compromise. They would build fortified cities in the land for their families and livestock, but the men would still cross the Jordan fully armed, fighting alongside the rest of the tribes until the land across the river was conquered and allotted. Once the other tribes had settled, they would return to their own lands, east of the Jordan. Moses, after consulting with God, agreed to this proposal on the condition that they fulfill their promise to assist their brothers in battle. Satisfied with the arrangement, Moses divided the land of Gilead between the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and half of the tribe of Manasseh, another tribe that sought territory on the east side of the Jordan. This region, with its rich pastures and strategic cities, became the inheritance of these tribes. The leaders of Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh began preparing their families and livestock for life in these new territories, while also readying their warriors for the battles ahead across the river. With the tribes' agreement settled, the Israelites resumed their preparations for entering the Promised Land. They reviewed the journey they had taken from Egypt, reflecting on the victories and trials they had faced. As they made plans for the conquest of Canaan, Moses issued final instructions regarding the division of the land, the establishment of cities of refuge, and the importance of following God's commands. These instructions underscored the significance of unity and faithfulness as they stood on the threshold of a new chapter in their history.
All right. Once again, shout out to this dear brother for making these series and putting this great information together. Going through the book of Numbers and pulling out uh, the all the points. I think he hit every point. We're gonna get into Numbers here soon. We are in the book of Exodus at the moment, and Leviticus is next, and then Numbers. And uh, yeah, so we'll definitely re-review this particular video to see if anything was not brought out. But from what I can tell, the brother did an excellent job at going through this particular video. So shout out to the brother. I believe his name was John Tally. Tally is his last name. I can't recall what his first name was, but shout out to the brother who does these videos. His name was listed at the front of the video, and doing a magnificent job, brother. We certainly appreciate you. I wouldn't give any critique, any negative critique. I would, however, wish, or I would have a desire that you would use the name of the Abba instead of the Lord. That was never his name. I know that's what we read in the KJV and other translations, but that's just because of a doctrine that we shouldn't adhere to. So, all right, with that, I'm gonna go ahead and close it on out, giving praise, honor, and esteem to the Most High Power, Yahuwah Bahashem, Yahushua HaMashiach. Before we close out, Salakia. I think I forgot this on the last video. Forgive me. Book of Ecclesiastes, chapter number 12 and verse number 13. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear the Most High and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. It is so very important that we understand that in the conclusion of the whole matter, we are to fear the Most High and keep his commandments, because this is the whole duty of man. At the end of the day, when it is all said and done, all the dust is settled and all the smoke is cleared, we will be judged on whether we have feared the Most High and kept his commandments, because this is the whole duty of man. I am your Akazaki Yahu, giving all praises, honor, and great esteem unto the Most High Power, Yahuwah, Bahashem, Yahushua HaMashiach, and to the 12 tribes of Israel who are scattered to the four quarters of the earth. I say Shalom, Wa, Baruchim. That is peace and blessings. And I cannot wait until the Most High brings us back together, and we are once again 12 tribes, one family, one nation, unto the Most High Power, under one covenant, back in our own land with a heart of flesh and no more a heart of stone, with our enemies under our feet. Until that day come, Shalom, family.